All praises to the Most High, YAHAWAH Shem YAHAWASHI, Bahashem Rahahak. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in his truth in all sincerity. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 in the KJV. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. So this was a question that I posed to the Google AI overview. If the implantable RFID micro chip for buying and selling were made mandatory, what biometric procedures and infrastructure would have to be put into place before that could happen? Its answer was making an implantable RFID micro chip mandatory for commerce requires massive global infrastructure. Governments and industries would need to build secure biometric enrollment systems, universal tracking networks, and strict legal frameworks before launching such a mandate. So the very first thing here on the list that he gave was biometric enrollment and verification, initial scanning, universal fingerprint, iris, or facial scan to link a human body to a unique digital identity. And I was curious, just wanted to know the exact definition of unique digital identity and some of the common types of digital identities, or identification I should say, is mobile driver's license, state issued digital IDs on phones accepted at select airports and stores, national electronic IDs, government systems like Estonia's EID or Denmark's MIT ID used for taxes and banking, biometric profiles, unique physical markers like face or fingerprint scans tied to an online account, device identifiers, hardware codes like a phone's IMEI or computer's MAC address for non-human entities. And so before I go any further with this, all of that particular information as it pertains to unique identification, unique digital ID, I should say, all of that particular information that was just read there, we know that as it pertains to these particular types of identification, Nokia's CEO Pekka Lundmark stated at a World Economic Forum in Davos in May 2022 that traditional smartphones will no longer be the most common interface by 2030, noting that many devices will instead be built directly into our bodies as 6G technology emerges. And I've done a couple of videos on this particular statement here in the past. Just wanted to bring that out, that everything that they mentioned in this previous slide that I showed here, the common types of digital IDs, these are things that we can carry around, such as a mobile driver's license or a state issued digital ID on your phone. You can carry that around, but they're saying by 2030, this stuff will actually be implanted into your body. So this type of stuff, there's an actual system, there's an actual infrastructure that has to be established and built first, I should say, in order for the MOTB to actually be able to be implemented worldwide. And that's what we're seeing all over the world. The very last video I did, I went into a particular website that I use here called biometricupdate.com, and this particular website gives you a complete breakdown of everything that's happening with this technology here. And this thing updates multiple times a day throughout the day here. Once again, this is biometricupdate.com, and it shows you how this particular infrastructure is being built all over the world. The very first thing you see here on the list, Malaysian government. So that's Malaysia. You scroll down, you see Sri Lanka. You scroll down a little bit more, Cameroon. Cameroon eyes national interoperability infrastructure to drive digital government. Sri Lanka advances biometric passport rollout with new immigration bill. Malaysian government considers bid to acquire Datasonic from NextG for $1.9 billion. So it gives you a pretty much a up-to-date update as to exactly what's going on with this digital infrastructure that's being built all over the world here, as it's preparing for the MOTB system, for this B system to take place here. Haiti secures OAS, Japan backing to expand biometric ID. Scotland's police inspector backs faster rollout of facial recognition AI. See, I'm not even reading or going into the articles themselves. I'm just showing you here, that this B system is starting to engulf the entire world here. So I'm going to go back to the article that I actually wanted to use for this. In this article here, the expanding role of face biometrics for better and for worse, written by somebody by the name of Chris Burt approximately 42 minutes ago. So I'll get into this in just a second here. So the expanding role of face biometrics for better and for worse. I'm not going to read the entire article. It is pretty lengthy here, but I'll try to get into some of the key points. Face biometric software can add investigative capabilities, secure access points, and enable whole new applications wherever there is a camera and computer. As integration becomes easier, face biometrics is moving from a standalone technology into the infrastructure of retail, identity, immigration, wearables, and everyday devices. I'll skip this next paragraph. I'm going to scroll down to facial recognition becomes infrastructure. America's USCIS, and I do believe that means United States Central Immigration Service, is planning to spend over $100 million to acquire immigration biometrics. So this is another example of the elites who are actually running this country. They are creating a problem, which was the borders that were unmanned, borders that were just allowing people from all over the world to enter the country by the millions. And now they're coming up with their own solution to fix that particular problem. So now that you have the border secure, the people who are already here illegally or undocumented, we see now that the America's United States Central Immigration Service is planning to spend over $100 million to acquire immigration biometrics. This is them creating the problem and then coming up with a solution for that problem. So the plan describes a significant IT infrastructure project that will combine yet unannounced tools to help with entity resolution in line with DHS person-centric model for immigration records. I'll scroll down a little bit more. Facial recognition becomes ambient, basically meaning facial recognition is becoming at a point where it's everywhere. It's starting to pop up in all types of different spaces or different venues. So this is something that they're going to roll forward with, regardless if you voted for it or not. They are pushing this out because this is exactly what the scriptures have said was going to happen in terms of this beast system being set up and starting to engulf the entire world, and that is Babylon included. Babylon likes to pride itself on having a democracy that's by the people, for the people, which we know is complete bull. It's just simply not true. This has always been a country in which the elites actually run this. They give you the illusion that you have power by participating in their electoral system, but that's just actually not the case. This right here isn't anything that I know of anybody voting for. Facial recognition becoming ambient, becoming everywhere, walking inside a store, whether it's a grocery store or a department store. And as soon as you're walking in there, there's a robot rolling up to you, scanning your face. No one voted for that, not that I know of. But it doesn't matter. This is what, you know, where Babylon is, but not just Babylon. This is where the entire world is heading, And so, once again, this particular website is biometricupdate.com, and you can get these alerts. They pretty much pop up all day on your phone if you set your alerts to it. But if not, you can just periodically check the website, and pretty much almost every other hour there's a brand new article coming out showing, just where the world is heading with this type of technology. So facial recognition becomes ambient. What exactly ICE's Homeland Security investigations needed? Clearview AI's facial recognition for has been revealed in court documents. So once again, they're just rolling this out. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. As a matter of fact, I'll read a little bit of each one of these. Petitioners are going to the Supreme Court of India to challenge the use of facial recognition by police that protest. Police in Delhi use smart glasses with facial recognition software, and petitioners associated with the Cockroach Janta Party. I'll scroll down a little bit. Meta's newly published patent for AI assistance on its smart glasses includes facial recognition as well as potential restrictions to protect privacy. Next paragraph. Biometric surveillance by law enforcement is a regulated issue, but as featured integrated with domestic items like doorbells, it is not. Fraser Sampson points out in his column that leaves a gap through which the normalization of covert, always on surveillance of public spaces is creeping. In Canada, a genetic ALPR camera was installed and almost immediately removed by Montreal police under a wave of public scrutiny and comparisons to the flock cameras used in the U.S. Genetic tells biometric update. So like I just said, no one in this country that I know of, or even I didn't hear any politicians running on this in the past. I didn't hear anybody saying this, but if you go back, if you remember back around after 9/11, this stuff was already with the Patriot Act. 9/11 happened, and their way of creating a problem and then coming up with a solution was the Patriot Act, in which, that particular administration basically made it to where everyone was going to be under a constant surveillance state. And that's where we are right now. There's a lot of people who still don't believe that the MOTB is indeed the micro C-hip, but in due time they're going to find that out the hard way. And this was all being set up. This wasn't something that somebody, just a few politicians or the ruling class elite, just woke up last week and said, hey, we're going to do this next. No, this was already being prepared, long before 9/11. I believe the first implantable RFID micro C-hip was implanted in an individual back in 1998. That was 3 years before 9/11. That was years before the Patriot Act. So this was already, in the works. This was something that they have already been working on for some time here. I'm going to continue with this particular article. Next paragraph. The use of Amazon recognition by St. Louis police in a case leading to a false arrest lawsuit may or may not have violated AWS's terms of service. The company tells Biometric Update by email it doesn't have all the details of how its technology was used in this particular instance yet. So, as of right now, this particular technology is being used without certain individuals' consent. Absolutely nobody's consent, I should say. Nobody is consenting to this, and this is why in this particular case here, the Amazon recognition, the use of Amazon recognition by St. Louis police may have led to a false arrest lawsuit. So as they're getting ready to roll this thing out, this MOTB, this is the time right here where they're continuing building these data centers all over the country, all over the world actually, but they're also working out the kinks, in cases like this where there may have been a case of false arrest. This is also the time that they're going to use. Remember the article, the Google AI overview slide that I just mentioned at the beginning of this video, where the individual said that these particular devices, now smartphones, that particular technology by 2030 would be implanted in people's bodies, either in their hand or forehead. So not the actual phone itself, but the micro chip, the RFID and NFC micro chip, I should say. So, like I said, this is the time right here. We're roughly 4 years away from that, and that's if that particular timetable that the individual used is correct. The more AI advances, the smarter AI gets, the closer we actually get to that. So they're projecting 2030. Remember, this was said, this particular individual, here, Pekka Lundmark, he stated this back in 2022. And you can see how fast AI is improving, how fast it's becoming smart. So back in 2022, he made an estimation that by 2030, these devices will be built directly into our bodies as 6G technology emerges. But the smarter AI becomes, the more advanced it becomes, that 2030 could very easily turn into 2028. So you have to keep that in mind. That was a rough estimate that he gave there. I'm going to go back to the article. I'm going to scroll down here. Brazil's 376 million face biometric database. I believe that should be Brazil's $360 million face biometric database. The week's most consequential development may have come from Brazil. Serpro's biometric database has grown to 376 million face biometric records. Slovakia, so that's pertaining to records there. So Serpro's biometric database has grown to 376 million face biometric records as the country shifts from fragmented identity systems towards sovereign national identity infrastructure, combining reusable biometric services, continuous authentication, and government-controlled cloud infrastructure. So once again, this thing is all over the place. I showed just a couple of I just only showed the headings here, but once again, that's the very first one you see there is the Malaysian government. We just saw about Brazil, Sri Lanka, Cameroon, Haiti, Japan, Scotland, Asia, Mexico. Mexico's new banking rules signal a new era for biometric identity verification. It doesn't matter who believes that the MOTB microchip is, that the RFID microchip, which is the mark of the beast, it doesn't matter who believes or doesn't believe it at this point. It's right in everyone's face right now. It's staring everybody down. It's right at your front door. So if you're still walking around in complete denial about this thing, at this point, there really may be no hope for you, So if you're in complete denial about this, the only thing you can do is ask the Most High. You have to pray sincerely. Ask the Most High to please open your eyes so that you may see this before falling victim to it. If we go to Ephesians chapter 6, we have been given almost a cheat code here in terms of how to face this type of wickedness, what we can do, in order to get us through these times here. I'm going to start with verse 10, the whole armor of Yahawah, Bahasham YAHAWASHI. A final word, be strong in Yahawah, Bahasham YAHAWASHI, and in his mighty power. Put on all of the Most High's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. Therefore, put on every piece of the Most High's armor, so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. then after the battle, you will still be standing firm. Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor of YAHAWASHI's righteousness. For shoes, put on a peace that comes from the good news so that you will be fully prepared. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the word of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh. I'm going to stop right there real brief and just quickly touch on each one of these. The belt of truth. And once you come into this truth, you'll start to easily become aware of who has a thorough understanding of the scriptures, especially as it pertains to prophecy and the current times that we are in. And that's exactly, how the Most High has set it up. The Most High has set up stumbling blocks, but he has also set up our true teachers, the ones who actually were given that ability. They were given that gift to understand the scriptures. And so that we're not confused as it pertains to the MOTB, and that's what this belt of truth is. This belt of truth it helps us be able to separate what's actually truth from what's false, what's actually people's misinterpretations of how they break down the scriptures versus what's actually happening, especially as it pertains to prophecy and the times that we're in. And this is where, the apostles of GMS, the bishops, the elders of GMS, they've actually, been gifted this particular ability to teach this word in all truthfulness and sincerity. And so that falls under, this belt of truth. And where we are right now, the next was a breastplate of righteousness, basically protecting the heart, even the soul. This particular breastplate of righteousness, it keeps your heart pure, which allows you to constantly call upon the name of the Most High, in all truthfulness and sincerity. It's not something where you never call upon the name of the Most High, but as soon as you find yourself in danger, that's when you want to do it. You only want to pay homage to the Most High when you're in need of something, as opposed to all the times you're supposed to be in constant communication with the Most High through prayer. And, you're supposed to call upon his name. And that's exactly what it says. And he'll hear you. Let's go to Jeremiah 29 real fast. Jeremiah 29 verses 12 through 14. And I'll go right back to Ephesians in a minute here. But Jeremiah 29 verses 12 through 14. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. That goes back to the breastplate of righteousness. The breastplate of righteousness, it keeps your heart pure, and it keeps you understanding. It keeps you to that point where you understand that you have to call on the name of the Most High, Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai. So I'll read that one more time. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. Verse 14. And I will be found of you, saith Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai. And I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai. And I will bring you again into the place whence caused you to be carried away captive. And so, once again, the breastplate of righteousness, that is essential. This is an essential part of the putting on the full armor of the Most High, Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai. This is essential to have a purified heart, and one that allows you to constantly call upon the name of the Most High. Don't just wait for something, when something bad happens to you, or, when you find yourself in a bind, you haven't called upon the Most High, you haven't prayed in 3 or 4 years, but as soon as you find yourself in a bind, then all of a sudden, you have to keep constantly calling upon the Most High. You have to keep constantly praising his name. You find yourself in a situation where, your car breaks down on the highway. we understand that we have to, even then, praise the Most High at that point. Don't just call upon His name when you're in need of something, but this is supposed to be a constant, everyday, all day thing. I find myself sometimes at work. Sometimes at work, I'm sitting at my desk, and you just find yourself saying, "Call Haloyim, La Banawa Yahawah, Bahasham Hamashayak, Yahawashai, Bahasham Raha Kodash." All praises to the Most High. Yahawah, Bahasham Yahawashai, in the name of the Holy Spirit. But the next one on that list was shoes of gospel and peace. This gives you a firm and steady footing in this truth. This gives you the ability to take a strong stance, as it pertains to, standing up for this truth, and basically staying, you're not off balance. A good pair of shoes, the treading on the bottom of your shoes are good. You're not slipping and sliding all over the place, all off balanced. You're able to stand firm in this particular truth. You're not going to fold or buckle under pressure. You're not going to literally fold or fall down under pressure because you're standing firm, with these shoes. And this is a part of the armor of the Most High, Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai, the shield of faith. We know that this blocks the attacks of the wicked. This blocks, and not only that, but it blocks all fear and doubt that you may have. Times you may find yourself doubting yourself, or times you may find yourself fearful. We all know what's coming. We all know it's already right here. These are just the finishing touches on it before they actually make this thing mandatory and implement it all over the world. So, in these particular times where you're finding yourself, fearful or doubtful, when you're strong in your faith, you're not going to have those particular feelings anyway. When you're really, really strong in your faith, but, there's some people out there and they're not understanding this, in terms of putting on this particular armor. They don't have their shield up, and that's why they start losing faith. That shield, once again, it blocks the attacks of the wicked. This particular technology that they're trying to come out, your faith, your shield of faith, once you put all your faith in the Most High, Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai, you're not really worried about this. In fact, you're not even really worried about the repercussions of failing to go along with this beast system, because the Most High, Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai, has a plan for you. You understand? You already know that, He's going to get you through it. And even if that is, facing the sword at that time, then you already know that the Most High, Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashai, has a plan for you in terms of you coming back. You will be the first awakened, as we enter the kingdom here. So that shield of faith is something that, once again, it blocks all fear and doubt, and it especially blocks sin. It stops you from sinning. In fact, once you put up this shield of faith, it blocks it blocks sin, and it is a sin to accept this mark. So it blocks that, and once sin, if you're not shielded from this, we all know that sin leads to death and destruction. So, once again, this particular shield of faith, this is something that, you have to have it. You can't have all of the other pieces of armor and then your faith is lacking. It won't work that way. You have to wear the entire, the entire uniform, you have to put on all the garments and carry the shield, the helmet of salvation. The helmet of salvation is what guards your mind, your thoughts, basically placing the bulk of your thoughts, on salvation and eternal life, the kingdom. So that's where your thoughts always have to be. You always, in this truth, you're always thinking of the righteous kingdom, especially when you consider where we are right now. There's not a day that goes by where, when you're in this truth, you're not, at least for a small portion of the day, if not most of the day, you're thinking about the kingdom. You've become completely kingdom minded. You're watching your tongue. You're watching what you do because you're scared of the Most High. Not so much that you're scared of your camp leaders, or you're scared of, you're scared of the Most High. You know that the Most High is watching. He sees everything. So, this particular, the put on the salvation as your helmet. This, like I said, you have to keep your mind on the Most High, YAHAWASHI, at all times. This is actually what, keeps you grounded as well. It once your mind is there and you have that fear of the Most High, this particular helmet of salvation, it keeps you on the straight and narrow path. So once again, this is essential. You cannot wear this uniform. You cannot wear this armor without that helmet. The helmet is essential here. So, and like I said, you're always thinking of a righteous kingdom. You know exactly where you are right now, but you also know and understand that a more righteous kingdom under the divine rulership of YAHAWAH, YAHAWASHI, is on the verge of being set up. So, and lastly was the sword of the Spirit, which is the word. The sword of the Spirit, that actually is the word of the Most High, Yahweh. And we know that the word is Hamashiach Yahawashai. I'm going to head over here to Revelation 19 real fast. Revelation 19 and 13. I'll read this in the KJV. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yahweh. And we know that that is pertaining to Hamashiach Yahawashai. So when it says the sword of the Spirit, this is part of the armor, and this is what you need. You go by, the teachings of Hamashiach Yahawashai. We know that those teachings can only lead to eternal life. His teachings are the truth, and that's exactly what we need in order to, get about this particular kingdom that we have found ourselves in. So, and I want to look at something real quick. The Hebrew word debar. We know that the Hebrew word debar is word, and I'm going to just for the sake of let's use Psalms. Psalm 119, and I'll scroll all the way down to 9. Psalm 119 and 105. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. And, rightfully so, the word, Hamashiach Yahawashai, this is the word of the Most High Yahweh. And these are dark times. These are dark and perilous times that we're in right now. So that scripture right there, thy word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. That particular scripture actually goes in line with what I was just mentioning a few moments ago. So right here, thy word, let's look at the word. Word is the bar. So when you look at the word the bar, da. All right. So pronounced da is the fourth letter of the ancient Hebrew alphabet. The root word that da comes from is dalath, read from right to left. The root word that da comes from is dalath, pronounced. They have dalatha, but that's dalath, which means door. So the thing about the Hebrew language is you'll start to notice as you're studying it that each word has its own particular meaning, but when you can actually separate these words in some instances, and it still defines, or it still lets you know exactly what it is, what that word really means, I should say. So when you look at the bar, da is from the root word dalath, which means door, and we know that bar in Hebrew means sun. So in other words, the door is the sun, meaning the Son of the Most High, who is Yahawashai. that's bar there. So the sun is the door. When you look at the word, the bar right there, that's exactly what it's saying. So just wanted to point that out real fast. But let's go back to Ephesians chapter 6. I'm going to end this with verse 18. That's where I stopped. All right, so Ephesians 6, and I'm going to scroll down to 18. I'll read this in the NLT. Pray in the Spirit at all times, and on every occasion, stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. I wanted to end it right there, actually, with verse 18, because you can't put on the armor of the Most High, YAHAWASHI, and not pray. Prayer is the most important thing in this truth here. And so you can think that you're wearing the entire armor all you want, but if you're not in constant prayer mode, if you're not constantly praying all the time throughout the day, various times throughout the day, then a lot of it may actually be in vain. In fact, you'll probably just be fooling yourself. So I'll read verse 18 one more time here, and then I'll close out this video. Verse 18, once again, pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.